Welcome to Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Here's this week's question. Are you training your body or your nervous system?
This podcast exists for one reason: clarity. Clarity about violence, clarity about responsibility, and clarity about what it actually means to be prepared. This is not a show about fighting. It's not about aggression, dominance, or even just tactics. It's about judgment under pressure, restraint when force is justified, and responsibility for consequences of action and inaction. My name is Greg LeBoeuf, and I have spent over 3 decades working with men who face violence professionally and men who face it unexpectedly in ordinary lives. But I'm also a father and a husband, and like many of you, I've watched the world change faster than most people are willing to admit. This podcast isn't here to scare you, but it's also not here to reassure you. It's here to help you think clearly about situations that do not allow time for thinking. If you're looking for shortcuts, hype, or entertainment, this is probably not for you. But if you believe preparation is a responsibility, not an obsession, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
Okay, listen, welcome to this week's episode. Many men think that readiness is purely physical, right? Strength, speed, capability, skill sets. But in serious situations, it is rarely the physical that will fail first. It's cognitive, it's delay, it's confusion, it's misinterpretation, it's hesitation. The mind struggles to process what is actually happening, even though the moment continues to move forward. In this episode, I want to talk about cognitive readiness, the ability to recognize, interpret, and to decide under pressure. So let's start off with maybe the first point. Why do most men, why do they simply miss or don't see what's actually happening until it's too late? And the easiest, I think it's kind of an analogy. The best analogy, I think, the simplest one anyhow, is you have to think about it like a radar. The human system, the survival reaction model starts with perception. As human beings, we have the 5 senses. So this is your sensory inputs, right? We are perceiving everything that is happening around us in the world consistently all the time. Even while we're sleeping, we are perceiving through our 5 senses, right? See it, smell it, touch it, taste it, feel it, all that type of stuff. So the 5 senses are constantly pulling in data. Well, this is like a radar. Your senses are constantly going out into the world and perceiving, okay? The next step off perception is, think of it like your radar goes through a filter, because the radar is actively pinging or looking for something, right? If you have a radar that is to track airspace and something enters the airspace, the radar is going to pick up on it. Much like a submarine or a boat with sonar, you're pinging or you're looking for something specific. So think of it like a filter. You develop a radar to pick up on something specific. A radar for aircraft isn't going to pick up a single bird flying through the airspace because it's not designed to do that. Okay? So the human system has a radar. We have innate survival skills, instincts, right? So back in the day, you could understand that man's radar, his senses, were definitely tuned for things that could hurt or kill us, right? Man as gatherers went out and had to, if they smelt a certain smell, once that smell became familiar to them, that smell or that sound of the leaves rustling, and, you learn to differentiate between the wind blowing through the leaves and an animal stalking through the leaves. You learn to hear the difference between the sound of a twig snapping by just a branch falling, in the woods, or an animal or someone or something stepping on it. So we always have had this radar. That is our sensory faculties, is perception. Why most men miss what's happening is because, especially in first world countries and modern countries, for the most part, our radar has been tuned to many other things. And so men have lost a survival radar, so to speak, right? It does not mean that you are not, we all have the instincts. You can perceive a threat, but think of it like different qualities of radar. Okay, so if you have an untrained man and a trained man, if his training has been done, if it's really good training, it means that they have trained more than just the physical. a lot of training, far too much training, is always about the physical moment. It's about the physical conflict. And they're missing the pre-training and the aftermath training, the post-training. And there is that is a significant loss of skill set. One of which being what we're talking about now, which is the cognitive readiness. So developing a much higher quality radar. So you have an untrained man and a trained man. The untrained and trained man equally, if they're out somewhere and all of a sudden there's an explosion or there's gunshots, something big is happening, or you witness somebody all of a sudden brandishes a knife and starts stabbing people and is making their way through a crowd of people slashing and stabbing at people. Both men, trained and untrained, are going to recognize the threat because the sensory faculties, the eyes, you can see it, you can hear the screams, you can maybe even smell the blood. Like you know, your sensory faculties are picking up on this. Then the brain is going, well, is this a threat? And then the second part it's got to determine is, well, what level of threat is this? But you can see with something big like that, of course, people are going to see it and recognize it. But the question is, how is it that most men don't see what's happening until it's too late? So seeing it is not the same as processing it and responding to it. So the trained man and the untrained man both have the sensory faculties, so they both have a radar. The trained man has been developing or training or educating or weaponizing, whatever term you like, his sensory faculties. He's been setting the reticular activator of the brain, the filter of the brain, meaning what information gets sensory gated and what's important to me. Okay, when I'm hungry, my brain, the reticular activator is like, make sure that the sensory faculties are looking for any source of food because I need to eat. And so from 2 miles away, I'll see a 6-inch by 6-inch piece of yellow and go, man, look, there's a McDonald's 2 miles away. Where somebody who's sitting next to me who's not hungry is like, where? What are you even talking about? You know, you go to buy a car, say, I love this car because you don't see many of them on the road. Then all of a sudden, now that you buy it, you're seeing them everywhere. Same color, same car, same year, because your filter, your radar has been set saying, hey, listen, this means something to me. Don't sensory gate it. Make me aware of it. Okay, so a trained man has educated his radar. Whereas an untrained man, yes, he has a radar, but it is not honed for the specifics of violence. We also call this what's a condition yellow, which is you develop through really good training a threat-based perception of the world. That doesn't mean you live in paranoia. Threat-based perception of the world means that you have educated your radar and said, hey, here are a number of different markers that indicate a potential danger to me. So if and when we sense some of these things or any of these things, please make me aware of it. And so the body then makes us aware of it. So the trained man sees what is happening, and maybe he even his senses pick up on an individual walking through a crowd, but something's off baseline. He's not navigating his way through a crowd like the hundreds of other people who are taking it all in, chatting with somebody next to them, looking for the bathroom or looking for a certain concession stand because he's looking for, it's not normal. There's lots of people making their way through a crowd, but this individual, he's got a different look in his eye. He's got a different focus about him. He's got a different body language. Might be where his hands are placed, or it might be his shouldering position as he's moving through the crowd. But the trained individual sees this and goes, hey, that is off baseline behavior. And so the trained man moves this individual to secondary inspection, means he goes deeper. He starts to change his positioning within relation to this individual. He starts moving his family. He starts, maybe his hand slides to a tool that he might have on him just in case. But he is watching this individual. Whereas the trained man is still just living his life blissfully unaware, even though his radar is still going. But his radar is picking up on the scent of the hot dog that I'm hungry, I should get some food. He doesn't recognize this individual moving towards him, And so this is why most people miss it, is they simply have not developed the cognitive readiness because they have not developed or refined their reticular activator. They have not educated their senses to be able to recognize pre-incident indicators. So that is the main reason that good men would miss it. Now, once this situation kicks off, and now all of a sudden this untrained man and the trained man are seeing this individual and they see the blade come out. Well, at what point did the trained man see it, and at what point did the untrained man see it? Let's assume for the sake of this podcast that even the trained man was dealing with his family as much as he's trying to maintain situational awareness. It is impossible to be situationally aware at 360 degrees every second of every moment of your life. And so the trained man and the untrained man both equally do not see this individual making his way through the crowd. They do not see the pre-indicators that might warn you to take advanced action. They don't see any of it. At least the trained guy has a chance at seeing that. The untrained guy would need dumb luck to see it. Okay? But let's say all of a sudden the knife is out, neither one saw it. The first indicator they have is the scream of the victim who is first stabbed, which comes from behind them. The trained individual is far more likely to recognize the tonality and the inflection in the screams of the victim and the people around them that would alert him to the fact that this is not somebody just being, screaming, or somebody from like a scream of someone who's excited, or a scream of someone who's got surprised, or even a scream of someone who just got startled, even though there would be an element of that in there. It is the scream of horror. It is a scream that is and only typically heard when some sort of an atrocity is happening, something that is fracturing the cognitive abilities of the people that are being surrounded by it, because they're so disconnected from the reality of violence. And so the untrained guy just startles and looks and goes, what the hell is that? Whereas the trained guy also wants to know what it is, but he already has an idea of what it is. One of the most powerful things that I think comes from training is the mind hates a void. And so when something happens and we don't know what exactly is happening, and then we go, why is this happening? The brain will jump from one question to the next question to the next question, trying to fill a void. When you are trained or weaponized for violence, you don't have to actually have all of the facts. You won't experience the same void. Because if and when you hear a scream, a tonality, a yell, when you hear a sound, a bang, gunshot potentially, when you hear a sound that is connected to a radar filter that has been built for violence and you have educated it, your brain will fill in the void to the best of its ability with action, right? So the trained and untrained man, the untrained man, when he hears the scream, and they both hear the scream, they both turn to orientate towards the sound in an attempt to perceive more information. The untrained man, he experiences bilateral symmetry. He body orientates, he squares up, he straightens up, his head comes up, his eyes widen, pumping more energy. The sympathetic nervous system activates. His eyes widen, trying to pull in more information. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? He is desperately trying to pull in more information because he doesn't know what's going on. And so his tires are spinning in the mud. The trained man who heard the sound, same time, he also spins, but when he spins, his feet root a little bit. His body drops in a little bit. His hands elevate a little bit. His chin maybe tilts a little bit. His hand reaches out to the shoulder of his child or his wife and is pushing them back behind him or to the side. He's already slightly shuffling or moving towards a massive concrete pillar that is 10 feet away from him. He is doing something, even if that something is 5 to 10% of action or a response. And why? Not just because he's developed these reflexes that the second he hears a sound, his shields come up and he starts to get into combat mode. The tonality of the sound, remember, the information, the senses, the stimulus that's being pulled in has been run through a filter, which means it's been processed. It's been processed, just like if I take a sample and then I take it to a lab, the lab begins to process, let's say it's a water sample, they begin to process it. They begin to identify, different bacteria or strains of something inside the water. Well, your filter is doing that. That scream, that sound, that bang, that clash, that tone of voice, whatever that is being processed in that reticular activator because you have been weaponized for violence. And so when he turns, yes, he's having a reaction in the moment because the sound came, but his reaction turns into a response or action very, very, very quickly. And then, because again, his brain has said, hey, the survivable value lies in assuming that this sound with this tone and inflection, all that stuff, equals this. And so the question's already been answered. What was that? What's going on? It's an attack. A well-trained man doesn't need to know exactly what type of attack in that moment. It doesn't matter if it's a firearm. It doesn't matter if it's a knife. It doesn't matter if it's 5 guys or 2 guys or 1 guy. The first step is there's an attack. And so if there's an attack, let's move away from where we believe that danger is. The responses and the actions could be a number of different variables, but just to give you an idea why most men miss this. What would I think most people find alarming is the guy that the untrained man that turned around and stands straight up and body orientates and is, he's like almost off balance and eyes open wide and he's trying to gather more information. That spinning of the tires can last for, 30 to 90 seconds. I saw a study that said that the average individual, when they find themselves in some form of crisis, take up to 90 seconds to process what is happening and then make a decision to do something. And most times, what snaps them out of the perceptual side of going, what's going on, even though as fire engulfs the building they're standing there going, oh my God, is that a fire? Is that fire real? Is this part of some show? Is this a joke? What is this? What snaps them out of it is the sheep around them. And sheep have 2 speeds. They're grazing or they're stampeding. And so as they're stuck with the tire spinning, and then all of a sudden the screams, the shrieks, and the stampeding of all the other sheep around them snaps them out of the perceptual and into a reactive state of now they're running with everybody else. And you can study this, and many of you probably have. You can see large groups of people in danger, stampeding right past an exit or a high quality place to hide and cover, shelter, whatever it happens to be, because they get caught in the stampede, if they get caught in the reaction, they get swept up in that. And so this is why most men won't fully process until it's too late. Okay? The second maybe question, a part of this is, how does stress disrupt perception and decision making? Okay. I've talked about this in a lot of other podcasts, and so I'm just going to kind of be quick with this part of it, but let's actually just do what is required for men to experience stress. And a matter of fact, you have to actually classify stress into 2 categories. There's stress and then there's high stress. And this is pretty easy, right? One is there has to be at least a perceived deficit between the demands of a situation and your capability to handle those demands. So as a man, an untrained man, when he finally perceives, okay, oh shit, this is an attack. And maybe he sees the knife. We'll stick with that analogy. He sees the knife, someone stabbing other individuals coming his way. His brain is like, a knife, it's an attack, it's a knife attack. I don't know what to do in a knife attack. Like, what do I do? So there is the demands. I have a crazy guy coming towards me I've just witnessed him stab several other people, right? Like, so I'm not questioning whether or not he's going to stab me. I'm watching him stab people. He's coming right towards me. He's an angry looking large individual, maybe larger than that man, than myself in that perceived situation of this untrained man. And all of a sudden you're taking stock of what your skill sets are. And you're going, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not skilled. Like, where's a police officer? I don't have a gun. I don't have a knife. I'm not trained for this. So you have a perceived deficit. Now, that will cause stress. Anytime that there's demands and you go, geez, I can't really handle those demands, you're going to experience some stress. But what makes it super stress or high stress is the belief that there are immediate and very severe repercussions for failure to meet these demands. So in our analogy, the guy's standing going, I don't know what to do. I'm not trained for this. He feels stress. This guy's going to murder me. You know what's worse? My 2 daughters are standing right behind me. And so even if I just stay here and act as a human shield to the best of my ability, when he runs that 16-inch blade through my throat, my daughters are right behind me. So run, are they fast enough? Will they get away? Will he catch them? Now you're experiencing high stress because there are immediate and severe repercussions that either you will experience or someone that you care about and that is under your protection will experience. Now you have high stress. And so the question is, well, how does that stress impact your decision-making and perceptual skills? Well, it simply floods the system. If we use the analogy of a radar, let's just stick with this. Build a radar for whatever you want, and then literally flood the radar. So if you have air radar to detect aircraft in your airspace, and all of a sudden you're not talking about 10 planes hit your airspace. You could say an air traffic controller could monitor 10 planes. They probably do this every day. 100 planes. Oh, they could do that. 500 planes. They could do that. 1,000 planes. 3,000 planes. 5,000 planes. At what level, how many planes does it take to suddenly, unexpectedly enter the airspace before an air traffic controller, a single air traffic controller, is overwhelmed? Well, demands, your capability, immediate repercussions for failure to meet those demands. So if you had even 10 unexpected planes, 20, 50 unexpected planes enter the airspace, and you need to direct them, organize them, maneuver them in fractions of seconds, or every single person, including yourself, will die. Well, that's high stress. So you, at this point, if you can create any scenario that you want to create in your head, any analogy that allows you to feel the stress and pressure of that type of situation, making split-second decisions on imperfect information in a situation that you had no forewarning was going to happen. If you feel that stress and you go, geez, well, how does anybody handle that? You can't. That's just overwhelms. Well, here's the thing. Everybody boils at a different degree. There's people that can't handle any spice at all. Then there's people that can handle those hot peppers and reapers and all kinds of crazy stuff, and it doesn't bother them to the same degree. The simple analogy is that when you train, you can inoculate yourself against stress and even against super stress. So that, listen, there's no inoculating yourself fully, I don't believe, really against it. There's always a level of demands, your capability, and repercussions. There's always a combination of that could sink any one of us. And even on certain days, we have days where we are more switched on and days where we are not quite in homeostasis. We are in a deficit on certain things. And so we're more susceptible. But the trained man and the untrained man, well, who would you rather be? Well, I think almost everybody's like, well, I'd rather be trained. Why? Because it increases the odds. That's it. It increases my odds. And that's what we're looking for, isn't it? That's all we're asking for, is to give ourselves the best chance possible to survive often unpredictable, fast evolving, deadly encounters or situations, crisis, that could cost us everything that we care about. So this is the power and the importance of having cognitive readiness as a main part of your training. And that has to happen, that does happen, separate from your training of the physical moment. That's separate from just your fighting skills, your grappling skills, your striking skills, your weapon skills. Okay. I think that I had down one of the other points was to talk a little bit more about the role of awareness in preventing escalation. But I think that's already been made clear by this through my analogy of just when you build your radar and you build a radar for threat perception, the earlier that you see the potential of a threat combined with, see, here's maybe the main point of this. I've met guys that have really good perceptions. They're very intuitive through training. They're just really, really good at that. But I can think of a couple guys that they're way better than me even at I work hard at this, but they're way better, more just naturally better at it. And then with training, they just hit this weird level where they're very, very perceptive people. Like, especially when it comes to threats, they just really pick up on these subtle cues, man. And I'm always like, God, that's what I'm striving for. But their logic brain overrides their perceptual radar, meaning they can perceive at a crazy high level. But then their logical brain rationalizes it, justifies it, minimizes, makes excuses, or just flat out refuses to accept what they are seeing. And so therefore they hesitate. So I think that the role of awareness, it's not just having great awareness. It's having awareness and then having the self-belief to act on what you are becoming aware of, what you are perceiving. When you combine those two things together, that's a different human being. So you might not have this world-class level of perception. You go, listen, I have really good, solid, functional perception. I've trained and developed my radar. But my superpower is, because remember, when you are becoming aware of something, it is often well before it turns into something physical. You're not waiting. I call that the point of no return. The second it becomes this, you don't want to wait for a crisis. You want to take action. So the earlier you can become aware of something, and the earlier you take decisive action, the greater you alter or impact the outcome of that situation. That is just a basic mathematical formula. Awareness plus action equals increased impact. You will alter whatever is going to happen because early action has greater impact. Late action has minimal impact and requires more effort, more skill, more danger, all of that stuff. So that is how powerful awareness is when it comes to, cognitive readiness and it comes to weaponizing. Okay. There's one last little point that I have down here, which is why thinking clearly under pressure is a trained capacity. And I think I've answered that. I think when we just look at the analogy between the trained individual and the untrained individual, it just makes sense. You can see where the building of this radar, the development of cognitive readiness, it is literally like a superpower because it all happens before you have to be good enough to do something physically. It's like, what do I need to know so that I never have to use what I need to know to physically defend myself, right? And that's cognitive readiness. Like that's the power of this, and that's why I just can't recommend making sure that cognitive readiness training is a massive part of your development.
If you've listened this far, take a moment before moving on, not to agree with anything that I've said, but to notice what stayed with you. These conversations aren't meant to provide answers that you can memorize. They're meant to sharpen your judgment, to clarify your responsibility, and to help you think clearly about moments that don't allow time for thinking. If this episode raised questions, that's the point. If it made you more cautious rather than confident, that's a good thing. And if it didn't resonate with you, you don't need to force it. Preparation is personal, and it has to align with who you are and what you're responsible for. You don't need to do anything after this. Just carry the questions with you and pay attention to how you see the world this week. We'll continue the conversation next time.